Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, and in this video we're going to be doing a deep dive into one of the apps that I have actually used most over the last few years, and that is Skritter. Now Skritter is an app that can help you learn either Mandarin Chinese or Japanese, so if you're learning either of those languages, do stick around. This is going to be a one-stop shop, a really thorough deep dive into the app, and so it's going to be a little bit long, but it is organized into chapters down below that you can click on to jump to either section that you're most interested in. And I really look forward to telling you all about how, to be honest, Skritter has become a pretty essential companion tool for all of my Mandarin Chinese studies over the last few years. Now, right before we jump in, I want to let you know, full disclosure, this is a sponsored video, and I do have a positive relationship with the Skritter team, but I have talked to them and said, I'm going to be giving, my most honest and balanced review possible. I'll be sharing with you some things that I wish were better on Skritter, or even things I wish Skritter had. But since this is a sponsored video, I have my sort of standard affiliate link that you can use down below. If you want to try Skritter and you want to get a subscription, then you can save 10% using that first affiliate link that's clearly labeled in the description. But I also talked to Skritter about getting something special for those of you who are not sure and want to try out the app. And so they have actually very generously offered 2 free months for the first 500 people that click the other link in the description, which will take you to sign up where you can use the specific coupon code that I've listed there. And like I said, that will give you an extended 2-month free trial with no credit card needed, which is really pretty special because Skritter's standard trial is 7 days. So I want to thank you, Skritter, for giving such a kind and generous trial to my audience, and I hope that some of you will find that helpful. All right, with all that out the way, let's jump in. So first up, let's do a quick overview of Skritter's methodology and core functionality and features. Now, I want to start by saying that Skritter was originally mostly an app for helping you learn Chinese characters, whether it's in Japanese or in Chinese, and by extension, vocabulary. But I do think that in the last several years and even months, Skritter has really been evolving more and more into a well-rounded app that can actually help, support pretty much all of your studies. So we'll talk more about those different features they've been adding and things that they're planning to add later in the video. But at its core, Skritter basically is an app that combines active recall and space-time repetition through showing you flashcards for all kinds of different content. Like I said, it could primarily be characters or vocabulary. But it does so with a variety of different types of flashcards for each piece of content, right? So with a standard application for SRS or space-time repetition, you get one card, right, for each piece of content that you're learning, and that's going to combine pronunciation and meaning and all kinds of things. But with Skritter, for every piece of content for both Japanese and Chinese, they have a special flashcard that will test your knowledge of the pronunciation, a different card that will test your knowledge of the meaning, a different card that will test your ability to correctly write the character, although this is optional. You can turn that off if you're not interested in writing every character. And then for Chinese, they even have this feature where you can have a special card that will test your knowledge of the tones, which you kind of indicate with gestures on your device. And so I think that's fantastic because basically with Skritter, you get this complete system where they're going to handle the standard stuff. They have space-time repetition, so you're going to get all the scheduling taken care of for reviewing content that you learn. But they also, like I said, they handle this sort of multi-angle approach where you're attacking everything you learn on Skritter from all these different angles, right? And the nice thing is each one reinforces each other, right? So when you see a flashcard that's testing your knowledge of the pronunciation, well, as you do that and you see the answer and everything, you also see the meaning, right, as well. And the same thing goes for all the different cards. So you're seeing all the different aspects of learning a particular character or word over and over again, but the focus or emphasis is different on each time. And so I think it's really cool because that also allows Skritter to keep track of how well you know each aspect. So maybe you're constantly getting the meaning correct, but you might be getting the tone wrong every single time. And then that can factor into your reviews and what Skritter helps you to strengthen as you go forward. Now, something else that's really important is that most of the words on Skritter come with an example sentence. Now, this is not every word, so this is one part where I'm definitely going to be honest and say I have seen lots of words that didn't have an example sentence at all, or some that have a partially completed example. So it might have the definition, but not the audio, or in some cases you get like just the example sentence in the target language, but it doesn't have a definition or audio. And I think one area that I'd love to see a bit of improvement at this particular time is that they do have a lot of decks that are created for very popular and important resources, right? So, pretty much any major textbook, a lot of times Skritter has a pre-made deck, beautifully done, organized into chapters. So I think for those decks, at least, it'd be really nice to see all the vocabulary in those decks covered with complete examples, audio, everything. But like I said, it's a pretty big job. They have an enormous amount of content inside of Skritter, so it's a pretty big task to generate natural, colloquial, even example sentences with audio for every single entry. But like I said, that's the thing I'd love to see continue to improve over the years. So now let's talk a bit more about how I think Skritter is becoming more and more of a rounded application, and it's no longer just simply an app that you come to learn characters or even vocab. But first of all, the content is really expanding to the point where now, at least in my experience, both with Japanese, which I did look at quite a bit, and of course Mandarin Chinese, which I've actively been studying for about 2.5 years now with Skritter, almost every major piece of content, like especially textbooks, right? Most of the well-known textbooks, there's already a pre-made deck on Skritter, which means that you can sort of unlock some very powerful workflows without really needing to do anything else. So I'll give you a very concrete example. I have been studying with the pretty popular integrated Chinese textbook series, which is 4 textbooks. They're pretty big. That's a lot of content that could take you, in my case, years to go through. And I personally find textbook study to be quite intensive cognitively. It takes me a lot of effort and a lot of time to absorb things from textbooks versus, apps that have everything really nicely organized with activities and stuff. So the fact that I was able to, with no effort, just download 4 pre-made decks from Skritter that contained every piece of vocab from every chapter of those books, it enabled me to really supercharge my Chinese studies, and I really mean that. So what I did is that for every chapter, I would just learn the vocabulary ahead of time in Skritter. I'd go through some reviews when I'm out walking, stuff like that. And then when I actually opened the chapter for the first time, I could just devour the reading material at the beginning and also listening, right? And so I could focus a lot more on actually being able to digest the sentences and my comprehension versus just struggling with the vocabulary. And then I would go through all the grammar explanations. And once again, because I already knew all the vocab thanks to Skritter, I could actually focus my attention, and I also had more bandwidth mentally to actually try to understand the explanations, because once again, I wasn't burdened or impeded by still sort of struggling through all the vocab. So I just think that Skritter has become a really great tool for accompanying things like textbooks. But it's not just textbooks. They're now getting to the point where I know they're reaching out to a lot of other companies, making partnerships to basically make sure they've got you covered for all kinds of stuff. So if it's graded readers, a lot of graded readers now already have a pre-made deck inside of Skritter. All kinds of stuff like that. So I think that over time, Skritter is becoming this place where, it's not just about learning characters or vocab. It's, hey, what's your main resource? And then Skritter basically just supercharges that study. And the next part where I think it's really becoming just so much more helpful is that you can, of course, make your own, custom decks. Now, where Skritter really shines here, because you can make your own decks in most, flashcarding systems, but because Skritter is focused on Mandarin or Japanese, and they have all this data built up, right? All these words, characters, example sentences, everything. What happens is you don't have to worry about inputting both, the target language word and the meaning and all the other sort of metadata, if you will, around that particular word, the characters, the meanings, etymology, all kinds of stuff. Skritter already has that. And so when you're making a deck inside of Skritter, all you really have to do is just give Skritter the word you want to learn and then just choose the correct result from the results they give you. Boom, you have it. You've got the word, you've got any characters broken down. You can click on either character, get more information about it. You've got an example sentence, and you even have links to third-party apps like, for example, Pleco, a very popular dictionary for Mandarin Chinese. You can immediately jump to Pleco and then see 10 other example sentences. So for me, this has made creating my own custom decks, which by the way, I do that most of the time. I spend most of my time studying custom-made decks because I'm constantly studying all kinds of materials, be it podcasts or TV shows or song lyrics, right? Making those decks becomes very fast because, like I said, I'm just, all right, search for the word, boom, click it. And so I actually cut out the dictionary step a lot of times. Sometimes I will literally just search for the word inside of Skritter's deck creation mechanism, and then I find the definition and just add it to my deck all in one single workflow versus, first going to the dictionary, find all the definitions I need, and then going to Skritter and putting them in. It's just one single step. Now, one more thing I'll mention about specifically Skritter's review system that makes it very convenient versus other apps I personally have tried is that you can, first of all, combine reviews across all your decks. So a lot of apps that I have used, typically you basically review per deck. So if you want to review all the words from a particular deck, you have to go in, do that. And then if you want to review a different deck, you have to go into that as well. And it keeps it separate. Whereas with Skritter, you can actually just review all the content you've ever learned all in one go, which is pretty magical. But the other thing is that you can select or deselect specific decks. So if you want to just study 3 particular decks all at once, just do all the reviews, you can just go in and select those 3. Or if you, of course, just want to review a single deck, just select that one deck. So I love the flexibility that you can either review just one deck or, 20 decks all at once. You could just review all that content together, which is pretty amazing. I'll also mention here that Skritter also syncs across all your devices. So if you're studying on your phone, but also your tablet and maybe even the web app, it all syncs very well. And that's worked very well for me in the past. Now, one final way that Skritter has really started to become more rounded is they've now begun creating their own in-app courses, right? So they've actually created 2 so far. One is a character course, which basically teaches you the fundamentals and basics of how Chinese characters work, everything from the history of characters and looking at pictographic characters and then how they sort of evolved into more complex combinations. So you learn all about the history of characters, how they're composed, how they work, and you also learn about 150 characters through that course. But they also have an animal idiom course they've made, and these basically combine videos as well as Skritter's sort of core functionality. So every chapter has a video explanation, and then you can learn all the words covered in that class or that lesson through the Skritter interface. So that's pretty cool, and I know that from talking to them, they are planning to create more and more of these courses. So I think that's the real magic where Skritter in the future may become a lot more than just a supplement to a lot of these other resources. Skritter may become indeed its own pretty full-fledged resource, so I'll really look forward to seeing that evolve. So finally, let's talk a bit about, some other things that I really do wish Skritter had, or things that I personally always miss when I am using Skritter. And the biggest one for me is that I typically like to study with sentences. So in previous languages, like when I was studying German or Japanese or French using other apps like Anki or Memrise, whatever. These are very flexible apps. They don't have a lot of the amazing things Skritter does, right? Which I've already talked about. But I would usually work with sentences, right? Because I always want lots and lots of context wrapped around whatever I'm learning. So I would actually have very few individual words. At the very least, I would often have a preposition or, sort of collocations or things like that. But I'd often have pretty long sentences, and that's how I study. And with Skritter, at least at the moment, the primary way you're going to be learning is with vocabulary. So that is really useful. And of course, they do have the example sentences. So that's one of the really sort of saving graces for me using Skritter. But in the future, I would love to see it to become more of a core function, right? Where you could create decks that either focus on sentences entirely or maybe even combine them depending on what's, possible with their infrastructure. But I would love to see that, because that's always the biggest thing that I miss, is I just want to be able to study complete sentences inside of Skritter. Now, in terms of pricing, Skritter is $14.99 per month, and they do also have discounted rates if you purchase longer subscriptions, like for example, 1 year. And I think that's pretty reasonable. I would certainly say I have felt fine paying that. So I would say, especially given all the value I've been getting from Skritter these last couple of years, and I do pay full price to this day, I personally think that Skritter is worth the money, especially if you're going to be using it as a supplement also with your textbook study and anything else. But I think even, the task of learning Chinese characters in both Japanese and Mandarin Chinese is a big one. And so having such a useful resource to teach you both characters and vocabulary, that in itself is incredibly valuable with a tool that is as mature and that works as well as Skritter does. And I think that's pretty much everything. I would love to hear your feedback. Like I said, if you want to try Skritter and you're sure about it, please do, feel free to use my affiliate link, save 10% on your purchase, and support my channel if you wish. But honestly, if you're not sure, I would definitely say take advantage of that very generous offer. Like I said, first 500 people can use that coupon code in the description, and you'll get 2 months free trial, which is pretty incredible. You can learn an enormous amount with that. And one thing I do want to say is that the nice thing is, if you ever cancel your subscription to Skritter, so if you ever need to take a break, you can't afford it anymore, or whatever it might be, you can still review stuff you've already learned for free forever. And I actually really appreciate that, even just from a business standpoint. It's nice that if you do need to cancel your subscription in the future, you're not suddenly locked out of everything you have invested time into learning. You can still review forever and ever. And just to be clear, one Skritter subscription does give you access to both languages. There are separate apps to get on the App Store, but you get both with one subscription, which is also a pretty big benefit if you're learning both Japanese and Mandarin Chinese. And finally, Skritter does also have guest decks that are free. You can actually study those decks even if you don't have an account on Skritter. So there's lots of options for testing it out if you want to. And with that, I will leave you. I would love to hear any of your personal experiences with Skritter. And if you try it, please come back and let me know what you think. If you agree, disagree, any other points that you think I should have mentioned, let me know down below. But for now, I'll say see you next time. Happy language learning, and thank you all so much for watching.